Andronika Morris, and we are here today, as we are every Tuesday on WBOK 12:30 a.m. New Orleans, to talk about what it means to put housing first. First off, I want to wish everyone a amazing holiday season and do a little programming announcements as we're heading towards the end of the year. Today is not our last show for the year. We will be back next week with our last show, but this is the show before the holidays, before the big holiday, which is Christmas, which is in 2 days. And it does not. I don't know about y'all, but it's not beginning to feel a lot like Christmas. So today's show is very intentionally on a topic that is very connected to the season, and I'm so excited to have with us today a guest who's been on before, a good partner to us, and a tremendous champion for the work. Joe, thank you for joining us on Put Housing First, and welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be here. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you and to your listeners.
So, Joe, remind everybody, part of the reason why we wanted, and again, everybody, this is our partner, in case I said Joe, like he's Madonna or something, or Beyonce. It is Joe Heron Mueller with Unity of Greater New Orleans. Joe, thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here today.
And Joe, remind everybody, because you've been on before, this is not your first time on the show. So remind everybody about the work that you do at Unity.
Yeah, of course. Unity is a collaborative of some 50 or so organizations here in the Greater New Orleans area. We have a service area that encompasses both Orleans and Jefferson Parish. We have a shared mission. All of our organizations, our agencies, both faith-based and secular nonprofits, as well as governmental and institutions of higher education, have a shared mission of preventing, reducing, and ending homelessness. And to that end, we coordinate partnerships for housing programs for people, generally speaking, families who are very vulnerable, people with serious disabilities who have long-term homelessness, and people fleeing violence, to get those folks housed, to keep them housed, and to provide the supportive services to keep them housed. While we coordinate with emergency shelters, we don't operate as Unity, an emergency shelter as such, but we do work closely with emergency shelters as well to make sure that people who do have the misfortune of becoming homeless are able to resolve that in the most expedient manner possible.
So that's a mouthful. But I do think it's, I'm glad you gave that comprehensive breakdown, because and you would know this better than I, or as well as I do, because we've been in this fight for a minute. It is maddening and saddening where we are in this country, where we are in this city as it relates to our unhoused population. And a lot of well-intentioned people think that we all have everything that we need to end this crisis. And while what you laid out is comprehensive, right? It is the system is there to address almost every imaginable type of circumstance where someone could find themselves becoming unhoused, right? But unfortunately, go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. There are a lot of resources available, and we have systems of care in place to be able to help people. And not to cut you off, but there are more people who become homeless on a daily basis than our system has the capacity to assist. And so you wind up, having some a challenge of inflow into homelessness,
right,
even as we're very capable of getting folks rehoused, because we are the city with the greatest income inequality in the country,
Mm.
new people fall into homelessness on a regular basis.
Right. And then that was the point that I was getting at, is that while what you all at Unity have designed is thoughtful and, um, dare I say, elegant in a way and respectful, right? Because that's what all of us deserve, right? We deserve the folks who presume to serve us to be thoughtful and to think that we deserve something, a system that is elegant. But where the rubber meets the road is that we have not invested as a community, as a country, we have not invested in these strategies, these proven strategies to the level where they would not only be theoretical, they would actually be real, and available for anyone.
Yeah,
And
that's right. At a federal level, only 25% of the people who are eligible for rental assistance, for instance, receive it.
That's
right. And in our community, we have. When I say that we have the greatest disparity in income, the top 20% of people in New Orleans make nearly 8 times that of those who are making in the bottom 20% of people in New Orleans, and that's shouldn't be surprising, because the poverty rate in New Orleans is actually 23%, and so that income inequality is a major factor in the ability of people in the lowest quintile to be able to afford housing.
Yep. And it is somewhat surprising, I think, for a lot of people, because while I think a lot of us accept and understand the challenges that a lot of us are facing who live here in New Orleans, who call New Orleans and including the region home. Louisiana is a poor state. I think what would be surprising to people is to find out that there's such disparity, right? Because I think a lot of the folks in some of the upper tiers, they're also struggling, right? They may be making more money than the folks at the very bottom, but it's not working for them either. And I think that also speaks to the inherent problems in the system, the fact that it's not designed to truly serve everyone. And I mean mostly the investment strategies and the allocation of resources. And Joe, part of why we wanted to have you on to talk to you, and Elsa was supposed to join us as well, and so she may still, but we're grateful for you to be here, because there's a threat to the funding, and this has been coming for a while, right? That not just at the federal level, but also the state level, and even the local level, there has been. I don't want to call it scrutiny, because scrutiny suggests that people are examining things, and that's typical. I think, like, for example, last year when Landry took office, one of the things that he did across the state was had the legislative auditor start questioning the continuums of care, specifically around how many undocumented folks were in y'all systems, right?
There was a pretty broad audit by the Louisiana Legislative Auditor of Unity, which is one of 7 continuums of care. They had initially proposed to look at all 7 continuums of care across the state, but in the end chose to focus uniquely on Unity, which is a continuum of care for New Orleans, Jefferson, and Kenner. Mm-hmm. They looked at a variety of different things, but there were some real limitations in what they were and how they understood the system, because this is a system. The continuum of care system is one that's funded federally, mm-hmm, and mm-hmm. There are limitations at the state level to appreciate the various nuances of the continuum of care system, because the state, generally speaking, doesn't kick in a lot of revenue that is generated within the state. In other words, state funding for homeless services is largely pass-through money that passes from the federal government to the state and then is distributed. But yeah, as you pointed out earlier, there are a lot of challenges, including at the federal level, to the continuity of funding for homeless services. And so we're, strongly advocating to maintain stability in housing, because as folks know, as you know, as your listeners know, when housing is stable for an individual, for a family, they are so much more capable of managing their affairs. If they have health concerns, it's so much easier to keep your doctor's appointments, to maintain your medications, to care for your personal hygiene, to get the right nourishment that you need if you have a roof over your head. And so we strongly believe that the federal government, and particularly Congress, should intervene to make sure that there is a stable funding for housing programs like the ones that we operate, because there is a real concern right now that that the Department of Housing and Urban Development could implement substantial delays that would cause new and renewing programs not to be funded through the first 6 months of 2026.
And that's what I want to try. I'm trying to make the connection that this isn't a new that it's been joined by the federal level, which is a challenge, but that we've been having. And again, the disinvestment isn't even partisan, right? There have been Democrats and Republicans who have allowed this system to continue to not be fully funded. But there have been, tremendous steps made forward around things like the Housing First strategy that really put a fine point on what you're talking about, is getting folks to understand that if you accept that what's happening with being unhoused is one of the worst things that happened to someone, and you want to help them get out of it, you start by just housing them. And the things that we use as an excuse for the systemic failures, the things that we use to frankly disparage people and to justify systemic failures like drug addiction and mental illness and being poor and having an attitude, like those things that we qualify as deficiencies of character, when they really don't have anything to do with whether or not you should have a home, because everybody should have a home. You start poking at these things, and status is a part of that, and that's why I wanted to continue the arc and say like that. This is, and again, you all are, as an intermediary, as the service provider, sometimes the unintended casualty. I feel like what our leaders are doing often is attacking the unhoused from a fear perspective, also from a not wanting to be culpable, not wanting to take accountability on that, and just saying let's just get rid of them, and as opposed to the real intent, which is if you want to end homelessness, you should want to house people. That's not
right.
Not disappear
that's
them.
Right. That's right. People who are homeless have all kinds of things going on in their lives, and I speak as someone who has decades of experience, both working and living side by side with folks experiencing homelessness. And I will say, we take an approach, a sophisticated approach that is evidence-based, that looks at what is proven to work. And we implement those things. We take these approaches that are both evidence-based and client-centered, and it does focus on getting folks housed. But it's not getting folks housed and warehousing them or thinking that they're going to just disappear and all
Mm-hmm.
their problems will be solved, but it's wrapping around the services, the case management or mental health services or health services that make it possible for people to stay stably housed. And the reason they're evidence-based is because we want to do what works and what's cost-effective.
Right.
And it turns out that it's much more cost-effective to keep people in homes than it is to let folks languish on the street. And while there is a lot
That
of
seems like
interplay,
that seems like common sense, but common
yeah,
sense is a superpower at this point. It's so
yeah,
rare.
there was a time when people thought, well, if some folks are experiencing homelessness, it must be because of a deficiency in their character or their capacity,
Mm-hmm.
and they look, folks want to look for a personal reason why someone might experience homelessness. And while those things are important factors in any given person's life, which is why case management support, for instance, is so important, when we look at the community level factors influencing homelessness, they are economic.
Mm-hmm.
There are factors of in the housing markets in any given community, whether those markets are accessible, whether they're flexible, and whether the people living in them have adequate income to afford the housing that is available at their income levels. And so when we see rates of homelessness and what are the macro causes of homelessness, those are really economic drivers.
Right.
When you look at the personal, that will explain how you can help address and keep someone stable in housing. And so we do that.
Right.
But that's not going to tell you why people generally
Right.
are homeless, why homelessness is prevalent in any given community.
That's right. Addressing those issues is the how. That's not why they're homeless, though, right? I'm so glad you said that, and I love that turn of phrase because it's easy to get caught up in that. And of course, we're not talking about issuing personal responsibility. We're not talking about not addressing, not letting people, particularly folks who are in the grips of addiction and maybe having a mental health crisis, maybe not able to find a job. Like the folks are in crisis, but those crises, and you said this earlier, they're not going to be able to solve those crises. Them being on the streets or sleeping in a car or an abandoned home or even being doubled up, that's going to make it harder for them to get what they need in order to address those other challenges.
Spot on.
And because being unhoused, being housing insecure, actually is an incredible impediment to real progress when you think about children. And I think this is something you all also the continuum of care also doesn't just address the needs of single adults who might be struggling with homelessness, the prototypical unhoused. Y'all also serve, as you mentioned, people escaping violence. Those are families, and people also who are struggling with housing insecurity. Those are our seniors, right?
That's right. Yeah. If you'd like, I can give you some numbers too in terms of what we have been doing with those populations, if it would be interesting to you and your listeners.
Yes, it would be.
So over the last nearly 28 months, Unity has been working in partnership with the City of New Orleans and our other member agencies and service providers on a campaign to house single individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness or sheltered homelessness in particular. And this is just single individuals. Over 27 months, our goal was to house 1,500. And I won't get ahead of myself by announcing anything I shouldn't, but I will say that by the end of November, we had already housed 1,492 single individuals.
All right, now.
those
we'll let the
that
official announcement come out, but we'll say those the Put Housing First listeners can say, hey, I got a hint. Here first.
Yes, that's right. So 1,492 individuals, men and women, experiencing homelessness were housed in our community over a 27-month period from September of 2023 through November of 2025. So that is a very substantial number of people.
Yep.
But that is only a fraction of the total number of people that we house. In fact, it's roughly about half. Because
Wow.
we also house families, people in families. We house veterans. We house people who are survivors of violence and youth. And when you total all those folks up, in fact, in that same time period, there were 2,899 people housed.
Wow.
That's individuals housed from our community who are experiencing literal homelessness, people who are sleeping on the streets, people who are in shelters, people who were sleeping in their cars. And that is really a very substantial number of people. 639 of that nearly 3,000 are people who were fleeing violence, people who had survived violence and whose homelessness was a result or was related to their the violence that they were fleeing. So it is homelessness can be a very dangerous situation. And we're very proud of the work that we've done, not just Unity, but all of our member agencies in collaboration, the City of New Orleans, Jefferson Parish, and many, many nonprofits across our community. This is an average of over 100 people a month housed in our community, and we think that shows just how effective and powerful housing can be to improving the lives of folks in our community. And as bad as your listeners may think the problem is, imagine how much worse it would be were it not for all those folks who were successfully housed.
That's right.
Through the assistance of rent support. This doesn't even take into account those people who were helped just through shelter alone, but these are folks who were assisted through rental supports. Many other people are able to get out of homelessness on their own, and we try to reserve the subsidies that we have just for those who are most especially vulnerable.
Right. That's right. But that's the secret sauce, right? And you talked earlier about the evidence-based pieces, and again, there's a lot of customization. There's a lot of investment necessary. There's a lot of effort put into being able to help those many different kinds of folks. But again, you're talking about who's reflective of a community, and I think that's also a tension that we've been having. Also, I think that's been something perpetrated by folks who like the status quo. And don't want us investing more resources into addressing housing insecurity in order to prevent homelessness and also to help lift people out of homelessness. Is you'll get people focusing on the fact that those numbers that you talked about, most of those folks aren't the prototypical unhoused, right? Where you think it's a single person, like the image most people have is of a single person with some kind of issue and that they quote unquote want to be homeless. Not everybody wants to be housed. And I've had this conversation far too often in the last few years. And it becomes frustrating because and it's also a conversation, and we don't normally have it. I don't normally have it with regular New Orleanians. Because regular New Orleanians who've lived here all their lives and certainly who've been here at any point in the last 20 years for an extended period of time, heck, the people who've not made it back know anybody could be homeless. Just you have the right set of circumstances that New Orleans finds itself facing often in the form of these devastating hurricanes and these other disasters. And you may find yourself in a shelter. Maybe not here in New Orleans, but in Baton Rouge or in Atlanta, people still remember those wounds are still raw for a lot of folks. That Katrina showed that being unhoused wasn't a testament to your character, unless being a New Orleanian who lived in a levee system that was just waiting on a disaster. If that's our character, and I think that's also one of the no one is one of the things that we're always trying to talk about is to get people to make that connection, right? If
Yeah.
if all you had to be was a New Orleanian who lived here in August of 2005, that's not your and it's like it's identity and culture, but it's not character, and it's certainly not an excuse to fail us. It's certainly not an excuse to abandon us. It's certainly not an excuse to be putting systems in place that ill serve us. And so if you accept that, if you go, that's right, that's right, that's right, that's right, then you got to accept it for the men, women, and way too many children who tonight, the night before Christmas Eve, right? And I'm not overly religious, so I'm not gonna get up in here and start making connections to the the Christ child. But for those of you who are, please think about that. Like, and for those of you who are new to New Orleans, or those of you who are some of our problematic policymakers who who are more Grinch-like than they expect, we're gonna need your heart to grow over the next couple of years, because the challenges that this system is facing. I want to pivot, Joe, to what we're seeing at the federal level. So there have been questions. There have been, there's been underfunding and challenges that Unity and its partners have set goals and accomplished tremendous amounts of work. There's still more work that needs to be done. And right now, we're facing a worst case scenario at a time when we need Unity and its partners to be optimally working and increasing capacity. And we saw this during the pandemic. We saw what y'all could do if given the resources, right? We saw it. We saw Louisiana, New Orleans, specifically one of the first places to stand up the homelessness hotels. We saw that. We saw
and they're very successful in reducing street homelessness and saving people from the risks of exposure both to the elements and to communicable diseases. We saw it was very effective in getting people permanently housed as well. And when you hear some folks, you mentioned people who the idea that folks who don't want to be housed, but what we see regularly is that when folks are offered safe, secure options for housing, they take it. Not everybody wants to or is even cut out for living in a shelter environment, which is very institutional, can be busy and crowded, and for many folks, that feels safe and unthreatening, and they might prefer to sleep on the streets in some cases. Not everybody. We have more people experiencing sheltered homelessness in our communities than unsheltered homelessness. But nonetheless, when folks even experiencing unsheltered homelessness are given the opportunity for safe, affordable, secure housing, and they are able to understand it in that way, virtually all folks choose housing over unsheltered homelessness or sheltered homelessness. So we know that there are, and if folks don't work out in housing, if housing doesn't work out for those folks, we're willing to try again. But it's not likely that being housed is going to work better for them. But I'm happy to pivot too. I'm sorry to go on about that, but I'm happy to pivot to the federal issue that you brought up.
I wasn't going to. Yeah, I'm not terribly religious, so, but I do think I do like the time that we're taking this particular moment. There's so much going on. We can't take a break, but we do need to take a moment to be I think we can take a moment to be thoughtful, right? In a way that, if nothing else, if the season can't make us think about the humanity and each other's humanity, then all of the working and all of the pushing isn't going to accomplish much. So no, you go right on ahead. That's we wanted you here to talk about these issues, and I think that's a great piece, and I do think it helps with a pivot, because if we are able to see uh, our each other very clearly, right, to understand it's not about character, it's about systems failing, and systems poorly designed, poorly calibrated, and the interventions, the folks who are ready to rock and roll, not being armed appropriately. If we're clear about that, then we also that allows us to be crystal clear at the oncoming threats. And that is part of the pivot I do want us to think about, because as we get through this season, there are going to be opportunities for people to do kindness for each other. Some of you've already going to be volunteering to feed the unhoused over the holiday season. I don't need to remind you about that. Joe talked about y'all's partners. Y'all organize those kinds of things all the time, and incredible people, leaders in community, step up and make sure folks have a hot meal and kids have toys, and again, we don't get everybody, but there is effort. But all of that is under threat. Is that too broad a point to say, given what we're facing?
Well, when we look at the system that the federal government has put in place for funding homeless service programs, we see that that the Department of Housing and Urban Development had previously been authorized by Congress to fund those programs on a 2-year basis. And that 2-year basis is relatively new. It's been done in the past and was returned to a couple of years ago because Congress recognized that helps provide the right sort of stability to programs and allows them both the flexibility to change, but also the surety of knowing that funding is coming in a stable way, so that their programs and their participants are able to count on that housing to make the life improvements that they need to become independent and to remain stably housed. And unfortunately, back in July, HUD decided that they were going to reissue a competition for those funding, meaning that they were going to cut short the 2-year funding cycle and return to a 1-year funding cycle. But we waited July to August, August to September, and so on until the very end of November before HUD issued a new competition. And by
the
that
shutdown
point,
probably didn't help with that as well, right?
We've been told that exacerbated things for sure, because once the shutdown was over, it was released. But at any rate, the point remains, shutdown or not,
right,
that when this competition was issued, they provided only 2 months for what would normally be a 3 to 4 month process, and they proposed that they would not announce new grants until this coming May. This is based on their initial timeline sent out at the end of November. And the reason that's problematic is because even if grant awards are not announced until May, contracts and letters announcing those awards couldn't be expected by programs operating until really the end of July, at the very, very earliest. And what that means is that programs who are providing services to homeless folks or formerly homeless folks, housing and case management services, keeping them stably housed, would go unfunded. There would be no new programs, and any programs whose grants were set to renew during the first 6 months of 2026 would likely become unfunded. The programs would probably have to lay off staff, And if this continues, and I say would because that has been paused temporarily by a court, but it could be reinstituted at any time, depending on how what is ruled in that case. And HUD has already tried to reissue the grant award, again with a very truncated timeline and with unclear metrics as to how those awards would be given out. And when we looked at this at the end of November, Andronika, we saw that there are 902 people across the state of Louisiana who are in programs that renew during this time period between February and June 30th. 902 formerly unhoused folks who would very likely be thrown into homelessness again, and that those people are renting from over 400 different landlords. So those are 400 landlords who would not be receiving rental payments. And I don't want to put the landlords ahead of the folks who could very likely be thrown back out onto the street. But it is a very real concern that the lack of deliberateness in the federal rollout of changes to this program, that the lack of deliberation and forethought could really have serious administrative consequences. Because we can set aside criticism that some folks have laid as to what the content of this new HUD policies around homelessness could be, because there are differences of opinions, but elections have consequences, and so we understand that the new administration may want to change.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown. You're a good man trying to look for the...
But regardless of what the content is, I'm really just focused right now on the delays that are being instituted unnecessarily.
The carelessness, yes.
One of the reasons that this program has been so successful is because of the thoughtfulness that has been put into the design of the program, from the bottom up and from the top down. Individual communities have local competitions where our programs are evaluated for their effectiveness, are ranked based on their performance, and those programs are funded and have counted on renewal funding based on that effectiveness and at a very high level. And on our community here in New Orleans and across the state of Louisiana has done very well relative to other communities because of the high level of performance that we have shown repeatedly over many, many years. And we risk backpedaling on our successes, what I described to you earlier about all the people that we've housed over the last 27 months. We risk backpedaling substantially on that if Congress does not intervene to maintain what they had previously provided for, which is a 2-year funding cycle for these programs. Congress has the opportunity to do that when they return from their recess in January. They're going to be trying to pass another budget, and a provision that would allow those programs to renew. It would allow us to then institute any changes that the federal government would want to make in a thoughtful manner that would allow for the least disruption to unhoused folks.
Right.
We know that there are thousands, potentially more than 4,000 people at risk of homelessness from the changes that were meant, but 900 plus alone across the state of Louisiana are at risk as a result simply of the administrative delays. And
that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable.
It's unnecessary. And so we just want to think, how can we as a community, how can we as a nation maintain thoughtfulness, deliberation, intentionality, and respect for the communities who benefit from these programs, those who are unhoused as well as their neighbors, because frankly, none of us want to see an increase in street homelessness. Our state does not have the shelter capacity to absorb 900 more people falling into homelessness. So there is no doubt that many people, if Congress does not intervene and the delays are allowed to continue, if those delays persist, there will be a sharp increase in unsheltered homelessness across our state.
Right. And that is, again, these are things that we can avoid. And we need to be also, and that should be something that all of us are concerned about. I appreciated your point about not wanting to center the landlords over those 900 souls, many of whom were able to get into housing after sometimes years on the streets, right, across the state of Louisiana, not just in New Orleans. And I agree with that. I also want the audience, though, to think about this again. For those of you who don't get it, who aren't New Orleanians, who aren't people who were affected by Katrina, and you're listening and you don't, or it's been 20 years and you've forgotten what it was like to be unhoused, what it was like to sleep on somebody else's sofa, to have to sleep in a hotel or wherever you were able to evacuate to, or be rescued and find shelter in. If you've forgotten those things, you also need to think about what we're also talking about is ultimately these are our neighbors, these are our friends, these are us, and they deserve housing. We all do. And it's a part of a healthy ecosystem, it's a part of a healthy community. And so the economic effects are incredible. And it's not just the moral argument. This is what's best for all of us as a society. And the first people who are going to feel the pinch after the men, women, and children who may find themselves compromised simply by administrative delays, right?
That's right. And we're leaving $12 million on the table if we delay. That's $12 million funding 36 programs across the state of Louisiana.
That's right. Those are salaries for people who do damn good work on behalf of our communities, serving
that's right.
us. That we're gonna jeopardize their jobs.
We're jeopardizing their jobs as salaries of case managers and housing specialists. But the largest portion of it is for rental payments of $12 million. So that is money that goes back into the community,
right,
and that lifts up the community as a whole. And we're just, if we do not intervene, if Congress doesn't intervene to make sure that these administrative delays are stopped,
right,
and things are able to proceed as Congress had intended, then that's we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yep.
I don't know a better way to say
it. There's no other way to describe it other than shooting ourselves in the foot, intentionally, and then we're gonna go, well, what's happening? Why can't people pay their property taxes? Why aren't these businesses open when I need it? And again, it shouldn't be so transactional. We need to be thinking about this as what makes a healthy community, right? How do
a healthy community, a healthy community is a community in which people are able to pay their bills.
Right. That's right. And if they need help doing that, that help is afforded to them. That it doesn't matter how they pay their bills. It's that they can, and that they're thriving. They're thriving, not just not just stubbornly wedded to this idea, not just enduring. And the people of New Orleans hate being called resilient. Hate it, because often when we call the people resilient, and oftentimes the folks who will often claim that they're doing us the compliment of calling us resilient, they're the ones who have responsibility, authority, power, and money to actually intervene and make it so that we could either not have to endure whatever's coming, or they can make it easier for us to navigate those challenges, be it a terror attack, a blizzard, a millions of people descending on your city for a cultural event. The things that the people of this region have endured over the last year, and it's not it's not worked the way it needed to, right? It's the trickle down strategy doesn't work. We need to be talking about solutions that bubble up, that start with everybody having what they need because they live here. And that's just it. That's good enough. And then how we move on to the next step of welcoming those visitors so that they can enjoy our culture and the events that are happening here, the businesses that we have helped support and are working in. That's the circle of life, right? Not predator and prey.
And I appreciate how you put that.
Because this is, it is very frustrating. Joe, we only have about 5 minutes left. That time has flown by. So I want to make sure the listening audience also understands. So right now where we are with the federal, the NOFO, as it's called, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. We love acronyms in the housing world. And so the NOFO has been pulled. There's also been a lawsuit, right? The National Alliance for, I'm not remembering which one it is.
Yeah. So there are actually two lawsuits. So yeah, if I can, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but the notice that was initially issued at the end of November was pulled following two lawsuits from the state of Washington and the National Alliance to End Homelessness, among other states and organizations. And then it was reissued following a ruling that put a temporary restraining order on some aspects of the initial notice.
And that restraining order doesn't allow for the funding that the 900 souls need. That doesn't make that happen, right? Because those
yes, unfortunately, it's a little counterintuitive, but the application being put out is actually a delay because what Congress had provided for was a 2-year funding cycle. So a new application interrupts an existing funding cycle. So the court ordered that the 2-year funding cycle be reinstituted, but the same day, HUD then reissued a new 1-year funding cycle. The court has yet to relook at that application, and we expect that they will in the new year. We don't know whether that will be allowed to stand or not. But what we do know is that Congress can intervene, and they could provide that 2-year funding cycle be observed, be honored, because that was what HUD had told us back in 2023, and all the way up until July of this year, what we understood was going to take place, and that if HUD wants to make big changes, that they can begin to institute those changes at a later date, but not in a way that will interrupt services so dramatically.
Right.
And so that's why Congress can intervene, because what they're doing is not stopping HUD from making changes wholesale. It's just to say that we're not going to institute arbitrary and capricious changes without forethought into how those changes will take place and whether the services can be maintained. And so, and that's why an intervention to maintain the existing the 2-year funding cycle makes sense, and it shouldn't be left up to judges. This is a responsibility to the power of the purse, and we think that Congress should maintain and exercise that power.
Right.
And so that's our hope. I hope your listeners will check out the website endhomelessness.org because they have an action alert available on there where folks who are interested in learning more about this topic could come to understand more, but where they could also have a platform for contacting their representatives to let them know that, hey, this issue is something of concern to our community, and we want to make sure that we are addressing the problem that imposing unnecessary delays on these programs would have on our whole community, those people who are experiencing homelessness and those who care about them and who live with them as well.
And we are also this is also an important piece that the listening audience can help with. This is federal policy, or federal law, I should say, programs that are being redesigned on the fly and have very real world consequences. So you can reach out to your congressman or woman and make sure that you understand where they are on this. I know our congressman here in New Orleans has been very vocal about this, and this can't happen. That we can't plunge all these folks into being unhoused. And I think some of the other members of the delegation have indicated that they also have concerns. But what we need is Louisiana, and particularly the region, to speak with one voice, and to say that we remember what this is like, and we won't allow. We want you to do better, but we for damn sure don't want you undoing the bit you're doing now, right?
That's right. You know, we're going to have more folks falling into homelessness because of the issues that I outlined at the top of the show. But let's not allow administrative carelessness to force people who have already seen their homelessness end fall back into that same situation.
That's right. I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
That's just common sense. Just common sense.
It's a superpower, though. It's a superpower. But we got folks using the comic book tropes for ill, and we need Captain Common Sense, and that's what we need. We need folks on both sides of the aisle as well as across the region to understand this. I think often people see being unhoused as an issue in cities, and it's not. First of all, housing insecurity, especially in Louisiana, is significant and severe across the state. And if we had Elsa here, she would have talked a little bit about working in Lafayette and a more suburban and some rural communities, what that looks like, and how it does strain capacity. In cities we have infrastructure like but again, it's not suitable for housing. Like people living under bridges, that's not a solution.
That's right. And if I may interject, and I know we're running out of time, but I don't want to underplay anything that might happen in New Orleans, because this is very serious and would affect the whole state. But there are regions of the state that would be much worse off even than New Orleans. Mm-hmm. We see that Shreveport has their largest permanent supportive housing program renews during this time period. Yep. And that could potentially lead to nearly 200 people losing their housing just in that area. Monroe could see the bulk of their annual renewal just not happen.
Right.
And the large majority of people experiencing homelessness in their region, eastern Louisiana, could wind up back on the streets. And in that region, the predominant form of homelessness are families with children. Why would we allow that to happen? That's over 200 people in the Monroe area. We shouldn't see that happen. It's just not. It shouldn't be acceptable. And it does. It affects every corner of the state, both rural and urban, large cities and small. And let's just be good administrators, good custodians of the gifts that we have.
That's right. That's right.
And the resources that we've seen fit to put to address this problem. And I know you didn't want to get too religious, but this is a time. I'm gonna spend part of this Christmas holiday in church, and it's not lost on me that that Jesus, that his family were homeless, that they were refugees in a foreign land. And I think that for me, at the very least, personally, informs how I approach the work that I do and the spirit and the seriousness with which I take the work that our collaborative does to end folks' homelessness.
Well, I think that is a wonderful note to end on, Joe. And I want to thank you for making it. I did not make it because anybody who knows me knows that I'm a hopeful agnostic, but I think it is appropriate for a person of faith, not just faith in something bigger than us, but also faith in this work as you are to close us out that way. And I appreciate it, and we're so grateful for your partnership and y'all's leadership over there at Unity. And we're thinking of you and your team, and most importantly, the people you serve during this season. I want everyone who's listening to us to think about them, to think about what you can do, and to go to endhomelessnessnow.org.
Endhomelessness.org if you're interested in learning more about the federal funding issues. And if you'd like to learn more about Unity of Greater New Orleans, we are at unitygno.org. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
GNO.org. And we'll be praying for you and thinking about you in the new year. We appreciate all of your support, and we expect to continue our partnerships together.
All right. Thank you so much. And that is it. We're wrapping it up. I want to thank Joe Herrenmuller for joining us from Unity of Greater New Orleans. We want to wish you all a happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas for those who celebrate, and for everyone who's listening. We'll be back next week, same time, same channel, and we'll be live next week on WBOK 1230 New Orleans. I'm Andrew Morris. Y'all take care of each other out there, and remember to put housing first.